Download my free legato course right now and learn to play fast in the fastest way possible. It's 4 core exercises that you need to focus on in order to reach the highest level of mastery. And then I'm going to give you the 3 sub-skills of legato. Once you master these 3 little skills, then the overall skill of playing very fast runs using hammer-ons and pull-offs will be very easy. So go sign up right now and get immediate access for free. See you in the course. Hello, I was just gone there. Welcome to this little video about how to solo, basically, or how to learn to solo. Because what was that, right? When we look at something and we want to learn it, we often jump to conclusions about how to do that, and we start, okay, let's learn little bits and pieces of what he did, and then magically we'll learn to solo. But there's another approach as well, and of course it's a little more complex than that for most people, but there's another approach to really going about this, and I use that approach in many of my things or in many of my learning processes, and that is to pick things apart and see what's actually in there. What's in the soloing process? What skills do I need to learn in order to be able to freely play? To be able to sit down or stand up, whatever, and then be able to just play notes as the music goes by in the background. Because that ability is also the ability to compose. It's also the ability to compose great solos and great songs and everything. It's the ability to create music. And if you can do it real time, if you can learn the skill, and it's just a skill, it's not a magical thing that some people can do and others can't. It looks that way because most of us approach it in a rather inefficient way, I should say. So there's a lot of people out there who practice this for a long time, and they still seem to just not make sense musically when they play. And that's simply, in my perspective, a matter of learning the basic ingredients, the basic sub-skills of the skill of soloing. Before you can actually do it, and you can do it freely and just have fun doing it. Where it's not a chore. You're not trying to come up with licks or remember stuff to play. It's just like speaking, like I'm doing now. You're just improvising. You have a message and you're trying to get it across, and then you just have fun doing that. There are really 4 ingredients, 4 main areas that you need to master, and the first is, of course, notes, right? You need to be able to produce the notes. We just talked about that. But apart from just being able to pick them, we need scales. We need to know what scales to use over which chord, right? So we have kind of our tool there and say, okay, these notes sound really great. And of course, when we're talking blues, which is the whole foundation, and I should say that the blues is really a really cool lab for practicing all of this, because you have that. First of all, it's the foundation of all Western music almost, right? It's the foundation of jazz, of rock, of pop, and it's used everywhere. So, and we have those 3 basic chords that we repeat all over again, and that really is the best of worlds to practice improvising and to practice playing up against the music in a meaningful way. So I really warmly recommend going back to the roots in order to step 10 steps forward, really, or to leap forwards. So the first is notes, as I said. We need the scales. We need to know, and of course, if we stick to the blues here, if you have a blues in A, you use the A blues scale, and there's a ton of other tools you can use. You can use arpeggios to do different stuff, right? But those are really the layout of, okay, what options do I have with regards to what notes I can use? Secondly, we really need to be able to mix and blend those notes. We need our fingers here to be able to go in all kinds of directions at all kinds of times, right? So if I have my first finger on the high E string here, like that, and that's, where can I go from there? And most people say, just go anywhere. But you have to train that into your fingers. Because if you have to do it real time, you have to actually be able to go... or you have to be able to go... And the way to learn that, the way to be able to go in all kinds of directions, to get all kinds of ideas, is to learn sequences. To some degree, licks. I don't recommend those as anything else than a study in how to use the different phrasing techniques and how to put sequences together. But as a basis here, I really warmly recommend licks, as you probably know from my other videos. Oh, sorry, sequences, as you probably know from my other videos. Because those train your fingers to move in different directions, so you have more options per note that you're playing. So, depending on how many sequences you've been practicing, you have X number of options when you have your fourth finger on the top note of any string here. At least when we're talking real time. If it's slow, you can go, well, I can go wherever, right? But when you're playing, it's instant, and that instancy has to come from sequences to be, if you really want to be flexible in your approach and really improvise. Most people think, well, I want to learn to play what I have in my mind, what I hear in my head. But that's not the full story here. Nobody really just plays what's in their head. It's a combination of what your fingers are able to do and what you hear in your head. So as you grow better at learning sequences, you start to hear more and more complex ideas in your head that you can put down in notes immediately. So that's a process of learning both sequences, learning a bit of licks, training, something we're going to look at in a second, and then really making that process part of you. So it's in your brain, it's in your fingers, and then you start to... Then you start to play what's in your head, and your fingers are with you, right? You never really get the ability to just play anything unless you've been practicing moving your fingers in those directions or ways before. So, scales, arpeggios, sequences, tools of what notes to play, and then tools of how to move the different notes in different orders so you can start creating melodies. But we need a little extra thing there, because melodies. If I just go... If I play eighth notes or quarter notes or all the time, it's going to sound pretty boring. And there's a whole half of the equation here that we're missing, and that is rhythm. And this is one of the areas where people can really benefit enormously from focusing, because it's kind of like notes are really the flashy, audible, exciting part of playing, whereas rhythm is kind of concealed in a way, so we don't focus on it that much. But here's the kicker. Focusing on rhythm will give you explosive growth when it comes to soloing, because it's 50% of the equation, if not even more. You know, I can play two notes, and by using rhythm, third note there, right? But I have unlimited variety. Right? In two notes, if I can use rhythm, like a drummer playing a drum solo, it's just rhythm. And so that's half of the equation, at least. But it's only 10% of the work. Playing the notes, developing the technique, the scales, the arpeggios, the sequences, all that is really what takes up 90% of your practicing time, whereas 10% of it should be rhythm. But rhythm is over 50%. So you really get a maximum amount of benefit there, and anyone can become a master, an expert in rhythm very quickly if you really focus on it. But it requires you to focus on it for an extended period of time, and it requires you to always be tapping a rhythm. You know, I had this period of time, I think it was, half a year, 1 year, 2 years, I was always tapping something. In class, everywhere, on the bus, when I was walking, I was always absorbed with the rhythm, and it became like a bad habit, right? Like a spasm almost. It's automatic, but you need that in order to develop rhythm to the point where it's unconscious, and you just do it. It's just, right? It's just something that is part of you. So now we have notes, scales, arpeggios, sequences, so we can move the notes. We got rhythm. We're starting to build something really cool here. But those are really three skills already, right? Scales and arpeggios, and then the sequences. But those are all notes. And then rhythm, which is another skill. So we have two basic areas of skills here. Then the next thing is sound or phrasing, influencing the note. If you're playing a piano, you can just go press a key and it says bing, it's a perfect note. But on a guitar, it takes a little longer because you have to fret the note and you have to do it without ringing out the other strings. It doesn't have to ring out, and you have to pick it as well. So you have to do two things to sound a note. But on the other hand, you get to influence the sound of the note. So you get to do pinch harmonics. You get to do sliding and vibrato. And you get to combine all of these. So you really have an amazing ability to express yourself here and let the guitar sound like a voice almost. You can play loud and soft and fast, and you can use hammer-ons and pull-offs to get that fluent sound. You can use alternate picking. To get that hard sound. So you have unlimited amount of ways to influence the sound, and then you can combine them in unlimited ways, basically. You don't have unlimited ways of, stroking the note, but you can really do a lot here. And that's another skill. And that skill is very well learned using licks. But my advice here is to choose something that's very small. If you're going to use licks, then I advise you to use very small licks, like just like that. That's it. Because then you can study exactly how it sounds, and you can and really go into the phrasing technique and the phrasing part of it. Because and then when you combine that phrasing technique with the sequences, then phrasing and sequences and rhythm together is licks. But it's your licks. It's the stuff you create in real time. Right? It's all your stuff because you're creating it. You're speaking music here by taking notes, sequences, scales, arpeggios, and rhythm, and then the sound or the phrasing techniques, putting them together. Then suddenly you can create cool lines. You can create music. But there's one thing you need. There's one fourth area we need to add to the whole master skill of being able to solo in real time, and that is structure. Because it's not, you have a whole solo. You have 16 bars or 12 bars of music in the background. And you have to use that to play a solo. And so it has a beginning and an ending, and it develops, and it has to make sense in that time period, or that over that chord progression. And a lot of people forget that, and I did too. So whenever I was soloing, it was just go, and I was just trying to play something interesting lines, basically. I was on the line level, right? So I was focusing here, and I was trying to, that sounded pretty good, and then on new lick, and then suddenly, the whole thing was over, and I had to play the chord progression again, right? And you want to get to the next level from that. You want to get to the level where you can actually start a solo, and then you can end and begin. I'm just going to play a short demo of that. Here's the jam track. And so you have to be very conscious about what goes on in the background. Let me see if I can here we go. So you have to develop the ability to hear where the chord progression is going. And the blues is so great for that. Here comes the second chord in a second. Yeah, I'm gonna get that. And then back to the... here's the third chord. Second chord again, and then the first chord. And then back again. See, I'm playing the music here. Here comes the... Still, and then back again. So I hope you get my drift here. And this is the same for any style of music. The blues is just so cool because it has that very unified entity of that blues chord progression. And it's really cool. It's a really good tool to learn that. And if you can learn to play the blues here and play in that same way, relating to each chord change, changing your tools to some degree, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about putting lines together, lines that we create by focusing on the notes, the rhythm, and the sound, the phrasing, and then putting them together in a structure. And that structure comes from the chord progression to some extent. At least you're playing up against that. If you can do that, it's like pitch and catch. It's so much fun because suddenly you're part of the music and you're really having fun with it. But that takes some exercises or some practice because it has to be unconscious. And that's almost my final point here is that all of these areas here, all of these elements has to reach to a point where they're unconscious. You don't think about the music in the background. You just feel that chord change. You just feel the periods of the jam track or the track you're playing up against. And the sound of what you do has to become an automated part of you, like speaking. I don't think about whether or not I'm speaking loud or silent, rapidly or slowly, whether I'm having a sharp sound on my voice. All those things comes as a natural expression of what I want to communicate. And the same thing goes for playing guitar. And that magically happens when you become so good at your phrasing techniques and your bending, sliding, that it becomes unconscious, and then when you start playing, it actually comes out that way because you're a human being, and it's like talking, basically. So you start using these techniques unconsciously, really, and you start using your sequences, your tools, you start using rhythm when it's unconscious, when you reach the point of mastery. But the point of mastery doesn't have to be ultra high. And that's really an important key here. If you can set the bar relatively low, then you can start, improvising like a world-class player very early because you have focus, and you concentrate on saying, okay, my technique is basically, see if I can get some sound here. My technique is basically at this level. I can't play any faster than that. But on the other hand, I can really play this. This is super easy. Actually, I can play faster than this, but then I start focusing. So this is my level of mastery. This is super easy, and the key word is super easy. And then you start practicing phrasing techniques like, and you do those vibratos over and over again. And you start practicing your bending and your everything, right? But really, as little loops that you do all the time. And over and over and over again until it's just blah, blah, blah. And then you have blah, blah, blah skills. You're able to go... If you look at a player like B.B. King, he had very, a low level of technical skills. But when you looked at his phrasing, his rhythm skills in all of the 4 areas we just talked about, he was the king. But he didn't go for the ability to play super fast. You can do that if you want to. He didn't go for that extreme level. He really mastered the blues at the level he was at, and that just made him a world-class player. And you can do the same thing. You don't have to, work on each of these areas forever before you can start playing like a professional. And I really mean that. If you focus and concentrate on developing a few skills, developing your rhythm skills to a certain degree, and then really mastering them at that degree, instead of always going for something new, and never really getting there. So, those are the 4 areas you need to master. And instead of, practicing licks or practicing stuff haphazardly, it's a really good idea to focus on these areas and then look at what areas am I the worst at and what am I the best at. And because that's a very important thing, because let's say you're not so good at rhythm. That's one of your weak spots. Well, if all your other skills, your phrasing skills, sound, your notes, you're pretty good at that, you're pretty good at technique, all that is up here, but your rhythm skills are down here. I promise you, you'll have problems. But the cool thing is, if you bring your rhythm skills up to the other skills, all these other skills will really come to their full right and expression, and suddenly you'll sound completely different because you're working on bringing that skill up, and suddenly, whoa, we can hear how good you are at all the other things here. If your rhythm skills are lacking, you'll constantly be falling in and out of the music. So when you're trying to improvise, it's going to be, you're going to have trouble ending your lines, and you're going to, oh, that was pretty good, good beginning, and then, where am I going now? And it's amazing what focusing on those rhythm skills really means to you. So that's a very good idea. And you can start already now. You can start practicing. You don't need my help from here. What I suggest you do, though, is look into my Power Blues Skill Builder, which is really, it's 10 hours of me pinpointing every single little detail of what I've been talking about here, giving you loopable little exercises that will train these skills into your brain and body, so you'll be able to make them all come together in the end. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. And we have specific loopable exercises, as I said, easy stuff that you can do over and over again that will make all of this unconscious and bring you to that final level of being able to improvise freely with no problem, no focus. It's just a wordless process. You don't even choose stuff consciously. It just happens. And the Power Blues Skill Builder is really a program, that's what taught me how to do it. It was only when I looked into the blues that I started, everything came together, my technique, everything. When I started really studying a guy like Stevie Ray Vaughan, for instance, and I looked into what is going on there, and everything just came together. And once I mastered the blues at that level and could play over the chord progression, make sense musically, or just, pull a solo out of my hat and it sound pre-composed, then suddenly I could do the neoclassical stuff. Suddenly I could do jazz solos to some extent. My rock solos just completely transformed. So this is really not so much a program about the blues. Of course, we're going to look at the scales, the licks, not so much the licks, but the sequences, the tools you use for the blues, the rhythm skills, the strumming, all of that stuff. Right? We're going to look at all that, but the primary aim of that program is to teach you soloing. So I warmly recommend that you look into it, check out the program, see if it's for you, and then I'll see you on the other side, or I'll just see you on another YouTube video, free video, or whenever we meet, perhaps in real life. See you soon.